Good afternoon, everybody. As you know, my name is Dee Wild Kearney. I didn't know I was a group all on my own, though. Firstly, my thanks to you all for taking the time to listen to the evidence that we're submitting here today, and also for your support of a generation of women that have been let down by successive governments, not just once, but repeatedly. Today, I'm representing, as you say, several groups from the Pension Partners for Justice, particularly today, Women of Wales, modern-day suffragettes, and We Paid In, You Pay Out. Between them, they run into tens of thousands of members. They've asked me to deliver a less formal presentation, as you should already have our full PP for J portfolio and the We Paid In submission, which is, I think, vast, yeah, and that evidence will speak for itself. My presentation will just be 4 pages, as my fellow network member, HIlary Simpson of Waspi Campaign 2018, was going to cover a comprehensive range of effects on the 1950s women and their dependents and families on our behalf. So as we're sharing this time slot to help reduce the meeting time, forgive me if I'm a bit rushed and I'm also a bit hoarse. Today, I wanted you to consider the more personal toll on us all, and I would also like to flag up some of the more common sense considerations that is often smothered down by the rhetoric and spin that we get in Parliament. But one of the most important things I would like the members of the APPG to do today is to consider your own financial circumstances and your current lifestyles, and how every aspect of your life is relative to your own personal financial circumstances. And then I would ask you, please, to consider the following very seriously, as though this was going to be happening to you. So I'd like you to imagine that you've just discovered that in 12 months, all of your expected income for the next 6 years will be wiped out. You know, how would you survive? Keep your home, feed your children, care for your loved ones, maintain your self-esteem, your health, even your sanity in some cases. The list goes on. Then imagine that you may be ill, mentally exhausted, or in a job that you can no longer physically manage, or that you are alone with no support system or a husband, or worse perhaps, in a controlling and abusive relationship. Maintaining a lifestyle is only possible if you can maintain your expected income. And if that planned income is taken away from you through no fault of your own, you may find yourself one day in the devastating position that these women are suffering with, and all its implications and consequences. The thing that I find most offensive for myself as a woman is that after 30 years of being an independent professional woman, I am now dependent on my husband of 10 years to feed and clothe me. I now feel obligated to work as his unpaid manual labourer at the age of 63 because we cannot afford to employ help and he is exhausted. Working at this enforced labour-intensive pace to make up for my lacking pension is breaking us both physically and mentally. Both our retirement plans are in tatters, brought about by a badly thought out and unjust legislation that had the audacity to use equality as its excuse for what was overall a cynical cash grab. And this is evidenced by George Osborne's speech in the Economic Club of New York in 2014, where I quote him directly saying, "The single biggest saving we have ever made." Please note there's no mention from him there of a move to put right the historic inequality to men that is often spun to deflect the public from the real injustice. To quote the suffragette Susan Anthony, a woman must have a purse of her own. 100 years on, many thousands of us have lost financial independence once more. This is a disgrace and indirect discrimination against us as women. Let me move on now to quote the DWP report of 2004 conclusions. The research has highlighted a significant gap in knowledge about SPA amongst the people who have the characteristics identified by the department of those who are under-saving for their retirement. It is these groups that have the greatest need for information about the SPA issues. This low figure provides cause for concern and shows that information about the increase in SPA is not reaching the group of individuals who need to be informed the most. Well, I personally take exception to the term undersaving in this quote. It presumes that all women concerned actually had the ability to prepare and save, and is completely disconnected from the reality of life that many of these women have experienced. I don't know whether she's come in the meeting yet, but may I thank sincerely Dr. Philippa Whitford for stating in a recent APPG meeting that the Ombudsman's findings did not take into account that for many the delay was far longer, as late as 2011. But might I just correct that, because it's really, really important. And if you read the testimonies again, you will see that the ages that women found out are listed again and again as 57, 58, 59, even 60 years old. Those testimonies include many of the later born 1950s women, including myself, who still did not know in 2017, and for some even later, when information that was filtering down from the Waspi campaigns, and might I add, not the government, but the Waspi campaigns, started to filter down to those of us that were lucky enough to be computer savvy and actually on Facebook. To provide for a shortfall in pension of over £50,000, even with 10 years' notice, would have required savings of £5,000 per year, which quite frankly is laughable in many of these women's financial and employment circumstances, let alone in some cases with as little as a year to go. The Ombudsman's report, stating that up until 2004 and 5, the DWP had acted compliantly, concerns us. Regardless of what civil service code considers compliance, the Labour move in 2006 to plan a direct mailing to combat the high levels of ignorance is in itself a striking acknowledgement that it was actually from the onset in 1995 that the DWP had failed to take properly targeted and effective informative action. The research figures demonstrate this dramatically. 57% ignorance in 2004 is clear enough evidence. Forgive me, just one sec. Just looking for something. The Ombudsman report does not, however, consider thoroughly the many thousands of women like myself who did not receive a letter and in a massive number of cases had little or no time to prepare. I quote Steve Webb from the Work and Pensions Committee report of 2016. I am sure we miss people, so if someone says I never got a letter, then they are probably telling the truth. I don't dispute that. This ongoing widespread lack of awareness demonstrates that there was further maladministration still affecting women from 2009 until, in my last personal instance, when I was stood on the steps of the Royal Courts of Justice during the Back to 60 action, when a nurse came up to me and asked me if she was one of us. She was born in 1959 and had absolutely no idea what had happened to her. She had just found out, as she had rung up to find out how to claim, that she had a further 6 years to wait. It also concerns us that the Ombudsman's complaint started before many of the later born women found out, and their input, therefore, to the process was then curtailed by the moratorium being placed on the complaints in the system, citing the court case as its reason. If the 6 sample Ombudsman cases were only taken from earlier born women, it does then not cover the full cohort thoroughly, and it limits the evidence, and surely this must be addressed going forward. The flaws in the DWP methodology that in reality had gone on from the instigation of this legislation in 1995 has, in our opinion, been significantly understated in the Ombudsman's report. The research conclusion that I've quoted from the DWP 2004 report is in itself an admission of failure. Some of the reasons they failed could be directed towards perhaps some of the following circumstances. In 1995, they took an active decision to issue only 47,000 leaflets distributed through job centres and financial advisors mainly for 3.8 million women. The majority of those leaflets were never to be seen again, and certainly never by their intended demographic, being only available on request and with no effective campaign to inform them, the women, of their existence. It was a waste of taxpayers' monies and resources. Might I add, I worked as a business advisor in several job centres between 2007 and 2012 and never once laid eyes on one of these leaflets. So just spend a moment to calculate the effectiveness of the leaflet distribution that the government cited as a major campaign to inform us. It actually equates to 0.0012% of a leaflet per woman affected. My bit would have been that big. Yeah, and I'm being generous in that case. In 1997, Whitehall realised the mood had not worked and proposed a series of measures, including sending out a further leaflet with the P60s. But this suggestion was turned down flat by HIlary at the time, and one might ask why. It was a sensible suggestion. And marketing throughout this was non-existent virtually and badly directed, and it failed to assess the relevant channels to reach the 1950s women over and over again. And we find this lack of direction very hard to believe. The government needs to step up and do right by its hard-working women. There is absolutely no excuse for the delay considering the overwhelming evidence they have at their disposal. It does not take a court or an ombudsman to present this with any clarity. It is there for anyone with intelligence and a conscience to see and act on in good faith. Whilst we understand that the Ombudsman report looks at adherence to the Civil Service Code, the government has a moral duty to examine all the evidence and assess its own actions, and if it is a government with integrity, to right the wrong it has done to its citizens. Whilst figures from the ONS are fragmented for the whole of the UK, we know that up to 60 per day and around 20,000 per year 1950s women between the age of 60 and 66 years have been lost to date, and I know the calculations vary. What of those that will die this month and every month thereafter, many because of the life conditions they are now being forced to endure? Please do not tell us there is not the means to make fair and fast compensation for these women. The pension savings from our sisters' deaths are and will be vast. Alan Duran's MP in his maiden speech called the grand theft of the Waspi women's pensions one of the biggest crimes of this century. This, from a long-time served detective inspector, is a grave indictment of those responsible, but we would say it goes far deeper than that. If this government continues to disrespect the 1950s women and to ignore the devastation that it and successive governments' inaction has brought upon these women and their families, it is more than theft. Combined with the systematic erosion of pensioners' rights and safeguards, it is tantamount to a constructive cull. And I implore you to do everything in your power to cut through the callous stonewalling tactics that all these decent women are currently being subjected to and to seek immediate justice. And finally, let me end by asking you to consider one more thing, that a possible 4 more women, 1950s women, have died possibly while we are conducting this meeting. What justice for those women dying early and still betrayed by the governments that they had placed their trust in. Thank you very much.